just a minute then. All right, everybody. Welcome to Wrench Factor. I'm Jake Hall. This is where we discuss technologies, explore innovations shaping the future of manufacturing and industrial asset management. Here we are to discuss the biggest challenges and that really frontline workers and professionals are facing every single day. Now, I am not your normal host that you see. I'm Jake Hall, the Manufacturing Millennial. I have a passion for talking and sharing the stories and advocating everything that's happening in manufacturing and automation every single day. And to kick off my initial hosting, I have a great friend joining us today as well. I have Remus Pop. Remus, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well, Jake. How are you, man?
Doing
Appreciate
good.
the invite. Looking forward to talking shop. I know you and I have gone back and forth many times on many different forums, so I'm really excited to get this one going and chat.
Yeah, absolutely, man. We've had an amazing time, just our paths crossing over the years from different events, different programs, and it's really exciting to see how this industry is so involved with all these different types of solutions that are out there. So I guess, dive in a little bit. Tell us about your background and a little bit about what you're doing at Concept Reply today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my career, like many in our field, as a controls engineer. Fresh out of college, had the opportunity to work with a local company here in the Detroit area. And as of course, in Detroit, my first couple jobs were automotive. And so I learned kind of in the field by doing. I remember my first job, I went to Windsor Essex Engine for Ford, and I spent about a year doing on-site markups for electrical drawing. So, as happens during the build process, IO changes, IO blocks change, everything changes. So my job was to kind of walk the line, observe where these things had moved or if they got changed, and kind of update the drawings. From there, I got more into programming. So I did a lot of controls work, kind of launching different assembly lines for different automotives. And then I had the opportunity to work on a project for a battery manufacturer called A123 Systems, which was one of the green startups during that Obama era of green initiatives for the U.S. And so I got the opportunity to go there. 2 years into that role, things got kind of crazy because the company went bankrupt and we got bought by a Chinese entity. And so in order to continue selling product to the customers that we were, I actually got kind of just voluntold that I was going to now lead the MES deployment to our sister site in China. So I spent the next 2 years traveling back and forth to Shanghai, basically just building an MES system from scratch. And then kind of took that role to go more into the IT space, came back to the States, worked for a small integrator here again in the Detroit area. And then really where I kind of landed on this idea of what's kind of taken me to where I am in my career now is when I was at Dana. So Dana is a large tier one automotive supplier. And my job was to lead the tech stack for our global digital transformation initiative. So 160-ish factories. Our goal was to digitally transform all of them over the course of 5 years. And so I was big part of the team from a tech side of selecting the architecture, building the foundation, going to each plant and kind of launching this whole thing. So now at Concept Reply, I kind of lean on a lot of those past experiences. And really our goal is to help manufacturing customers understand where modern technology fits in the manufacturing space. Because as you and I probably both know very well, manufacturers are not really good at leveraging IT and IT technology. So I feel like I have a really good opportunity here based off my past and what we did at Dana to kind of help manufacturers really understand where we can take advantage of this new trend in technology.
Yeah. And I look at, the trend in technology, the digital transformation buzzword, I would say, has really been going on for, heavily 5-6 years.
Oh,
You
yeah.
could argue going back, a decade or more. Where are we at right now when it comes to this digital transformation trend that encompasses all these different softwares, all these different solutions, bringing this data to the manufacturing floor? where are we at in the grand scheme of things when it comes to our industry? Has a lot changed the last 10 years, or are we still kind of where we are? What are your overall thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it's a little bit of both. I think we have changed drastically in the technologies that's available, but I still think there's a struggle for manufacturers to understand where to plug this technology in. So I actually did this keynote last week, and one of the things I talked about is that essentially 5, 10 years ago, our focus was on connecting the factory. We were really focused on getting assets connected, getting things connected to the network, building dashboards, like the basic stuff, right? We just needed connectivity because up until then we didn't have it. But in the last couple of years, essentially that connectivity problem has been solved. There are
Mhm.
so many tools available now that allow us to rapidly deploy connectivity into factories, right? There's so many different technologies available.
Yeah,
So we kind of essentially solved that. The next piece that we are at now, and I think where the majority of manufacturers are, is trying to understand how to unlock the value of this data. Now that we've connected all these machines, we've got all this data. What the heck did we do with it? And I think
yeah,
you've seen kind of the rise of this idea of the unified namespace because it tries to put some context around that manufacturing data so that organizations can leverage it and build some value off of it. So I think
yeah.
we're in that weird spot. We're like, okay, now what? Like we've connected all the machines. We've got almost industry 4.0. How do we actually industry 4.0 everything?
Yeah, it's an interesting mindset when we can go back and look at how easy it is to get whatever we want in terms of information from the manufacturing floor. It was one of those things where a long time we were limited by the type of PLC or
Yeah.
piece of equipment or control system that was running on a piece of equipment or the manufacturing floor. But with today, we can pretty much bypass anything that we want and go directly to the cloud to be
Yeah.
able to get information, collect information, be able to process it, and hopefully understand it. Where would you say, um, now that we can collect this data, we have access to this data, we can begin to better understand this data. Who do you think inside the manufacturing floor needs to make these decisions in order for companies to really start leveraging where we're at currently? Is it the same people that were in charge of it 5 years ago, or do we see a new level of leadership and personnel kind of making these decisions now that we have the access to this information? What does that look like?
I think the general persona is still the same, right? So I'll kind of take my definition of Industry 4.0 is it is the connections of assets in a factory, both human and machine, for the purpose of delivering information to people that can act upon it the fastest. And so when we start talking to manufacturers about these digital transformation initiatives, the first question I always ask is, what problem are you trying to solve, right? Because I don't want to grab technology and look for a problem. It's much better, as everybody knows, the other way around. And so what we really try to understand from manufacturers is there's not a single plant manager out there that doesn't know his pain point in the factory, right? And so the goal is to kind of find what that person is struggling with and where can we plug in technology. But essentially, I break it into personas, right? From real time to global operations. There's about 6 to 7 tiers of levels of data or information within that bracket. So if we look at real time, that's generally the operator. The operator needs millisecond level data to understand what they need to do to accomplish their goals of that shift, right? You could even look at like a tier one, if you will, in that same realm. The more we go up the stack, the higher that granularity goes. But a lot of those KPIs might stay the same, right? So at real time, we might be looking at schedule adherence. At global operations level, we might be looking at schedule adherence across 6 sites, right?
Yeah,
Making sure that our
enterprise.
supply chain is meeting the demands of each individual factory. And we try to do that by breaking it also down into strategy pillars around the way we build this pipeline of information, because there is generally four strategy pillars that we want to go after, right? It's enabling market growth, enabling customer growth, excellence in operations, cost optimization, and then employee experience, right? Because that's one of the ones that I think people miss on a lot is we have to build tools that the employees are going to want to use, that are helpful, friendly, easy to use, adjustable, all those types of things.
Mhm.
So I think it kind of varies to answer your question, but I think it's very similar to what it's always been. It's always been the operator, the plant manager, maintenance tech, quality tech. Those guys and gals are not leaving, so we still need them.
The, Another topic I want to talk on is we always hear about this technology, but a lot of times people say, okay, show me where we're really seeing the value. Is there a company or a story or a solution that comes to mind where you can talk about where they were before the digital adoption, the digital transformation, the adoption of understanding data, and where they are now? Is there any companies, I mean, maybe from Dana from experience, or if there's any other companies from your experience on what you guys have done, what you have done personally in the past? Can you give us just a 3 or 4 minute just summary where they were, what you did, where they are now when it comes to this digital transformation?
Yeah, I'll start with Dana, and then I'll try to tie into like some more modern examples. With customers that we have today. I can't give away any names or anything, but I'll start at Dana because that one's pretty well established now. But when I joined Dana, we were in the middle of just an MES deployment at a brand new flagship facility, right? So we had just built Toledo Driveline, and it was building the axle for the Bronco, the Ranger, and the Wrangler, right? Some of the largest selling vehicles for those companies. And our job was to help launch that factory with technology, right? So we were doing the normal stuff, right? MES traceability, you got to have your birth certificate, all that fun stuff.
Mhm.
But what we unlocked along the way was visibility into operations that had never been achieved before. We had real-time access to every piece of data you could imagine. So much to the point that, our management, our leadership, after that first plant went live, I didn't get hired to do a global digital transformation. I got hired to just launch Toledo Driveline.
Yeah.
But at the end of that, it was so game changing that our leadership said, "Here is $10 million. I want you to go do 20 plants a year for the next 5 years. I'll give you $10 million every year. Just go do."
Yeah.
And so go build a team, go do whatever you have to do, unlock this value. And we did. We unlocked it to the tunes of tens of millions of dollars after those transformations that happened. So there was real value getting picked up by every one of these sites that we deploy. We did an AI project back in 2018, 2019 that solved a 3-decade-old problem around building axles, like that everybody had tried to solve for the last 30 years using AI and modern technology. We were able to solve it in 18 months. And so it's just one of those examples that are going crazy. I'll give you another one that's fun that we're doing with a customer right now around just leveraging this new technology is taking computer vision approaches to an age-old problem of torque curves, right? When we measure final angle, final torque on an assembly line, it's usually a final point, right? We gather the last point of the line to make sure that we hit those final numbers. But what we don't look at ever until there's a recall is the actual torque curve, because there's like 10,000 data points. What we can do now is, with a single data point using computer vision, look at the torque curve. So instead of measuring and trying to do machine learning across 10,000 data points, we can use one data point and use computer vision to say, is there anything on this profile that looks out of the norm? And then immediately flag that in real time, because sometimes you may hit final angle, final torque, even with a misthreaded bolt, right? So now in real time, you could potentially solve $1 million recall.
So instead of looking at the data points, you're looking at the visualization of the data
Exactly.
point
And so instead of trying to do,
Yeah.
10,000 data points, machine learning, that would be insanely, compute intensive. We're just doing one data point. We're looking at
So what you're saying is, when I was making all those graphs back in MATLAB, back in school, to look at data and create all these visual points, that there's actually value to that.
Absolutely.
Should have paid
Absolutely.
more attention.
Not in the way we would have ever thought, but it was just one of those things that, we were doing similar things in computer vision with other visual views. So we thought,
Yeah.
why not flip it to the manufacturing space where we know this stuff pretty well? And so, like, all those torque guns, they spit out that PDF file that shows you the torque curve, and they just drop it in a folder somewhere. Now, really quickly, we can just look at all those in real time.
Analyze the data, the curve itself.
Yep.
Oh, I love that. That's like, it makes so much sense when, after you look at it from that perspective, rather than trying to look at this data, you're just, no, let me visually just look at the curve that the data is plotting.
Yeah, you'll see it right away. You'll see a dip or a rise, and you'll know that something was wrong with that torque. Instead of like, because normally the original idea was, could we use machine learning and build a model to analyze that curve as it happens in real time? And you could. It would take a lot more data and a lot more compute, and a lot more effort. But we thought like, hey, why not just point computer vision at it? We have a visual. It's very easy to just say, does this thing look like this thing? And
does it match the model that we built on successful parts? If it doesn't match the model, then the data that model represents, obviously, doesn't work. That's great.
Exactly.
So when we look at digital transformation, and this is a conversation I know you had earlier with Nick here at MaintainX and before. There's a lot of things that I think companies are doing right when it comes to the digital transformation. But you mentioned one thing that we often overlook or we miss because maybe it's not the most sexy, maybe it's not the most upfront thing that every person in leadership wants to see. What are companies missing when it comes to data around digital manufacturing?
Yeah, we kind of touched on it early, right? So the goal of what we're trying to do with these transformations is unlock value. And so it's pretty funny that I didn't come to this realization until after talking with Nick and his team a few months ago at ICC. We went out to dinner and we were kind of just spitballing ideas, and they asked me in these projects that we're working on today at Concept Reply, how often is like maintenance part of these conversations around digital transformation? And up until that moment, I hadn't really thought much about where that fit into these conversations we were having, because go back to my time at Dana, that was core to what we were doing to unlock value, right? We were measuring MTTR, which is mean time to repair, and MTBF, mean time between failure. So that was one of like the key KPIs that we were looking at as part of unlocking value to these transformations. And when Nick's team asked me that, I kind of stopped me dead in my tracks, and I had to think back on like all these customers I've been working with over the last 5 years, and thought to I would say not one of them was really focused on the main. I'd say maybe one. There was a medical device manufacturer, and I would say probably that one because my boss at Dana is leading the transformation there. So it's
Yeah.
probably a good tie in between that. But outside of them, I don't think there was many customers that were looking at that, which is strange because it's one of the, in my opinion, one of the lowest hanging fruits that we could tap into to get value quickly, right? Especially with a platform like MaintainX, we can get there in a matter of weeks, as
Yeah.
opposed to a full on digital transformation. We got to build infrastructure, we got to deploy applications, we got to connect machines, like that whole thing. And so it kind of struck me very strange. And I've actually updated part of my pitch deck to talk a little bit more about how we could potentially leverage maintenance in these initial engagements. But
Yeah.
it's very bizarre to me because I really didn't didn't put two and two together until that conversation.
Well,
It's strange.
it's an interesting thing when you look about. So when I was wrapping up with my final jobs before I went to full-time Manufacturing Millennial, we were doing a bunch of modernization on equipment that did the bearing, ball, and drawer assemblies for drawer slides that go into a lot of your industrial tool cabinets.
Yep.
If you pull up an industrial tool cabinet, you go to a big store, it's probably those slides that that company was manufacturing. And so a lot of this equipment was coming from all over the world. It was constantly being put in. It was either being written and a local from either a Rockwell or a Siemens or some off-brand like South Korean whatever thing that didn't
Whatever. Yeah.
have any type of instructions or resources at all. And so we were put in charge to go out there and hey, a couple things, right? We need to understand and create a risk assessment of what equipment was prone to fail, what would fail, what the results would be, driving productivity on each one of these equipments. But at the end of the day, the discussion around just the maintenance of this equipment, because when the issue is when the manufacturer said, hey, how do we ensure this equipment is running? Well, none of us knew the answer to that because it was equipment that none of us were familiar with. We had zero documentation to know what the
Mhm.
preventative maintenance was on this, what we should be replacing, how long all these parts are expected to last for. And so for a company that was constantly driving on making sure they're pushing out a certain production amount each single week, it was a question where's the balance between productivity and OEE and also driving solutions and understanding around what is your maintenance that you need to have on this equipment. Because if it's shut down and you have these components and parts that nothing yet you could buy here in the US, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Are you going to have to go and completely redesign it? If you have to design it, you have to put in a new part. You have to go in and you have to understand and look at the code that you have zero understanding of how this is
Yeah.
documented because it's coded in a completely different language and not like a different programmer's language, like literally a different language. And so it's that balance that after you and I had that conversation of it's like
Yeah.
if we would have led with the direction of using digital transformation to better understand and support your maintenance teams. If we would have had, so those machines weren't shutting down every 2 to 3 weeks because of an issue, and instead of driving the most production out of when it is running, can we get 2 or 3 more % rather than can we keep it running? It's a new mindset of how companies could be doing a better job when it comes to from the maintenance side of digital transformation.
Yeah, everybody's talking about predictive maintenance, and can we get to the point where we can predict when a machine is going to go down? And how about we just get to the point where we can give maintenance the tools to respond quicker when the machine does go down, because it will, and it always will, right? We'll never see a machine that runs 100% of the time all the time.
Exactly.
It's just the nature of the beast that we operate in. So instead of focusing on trying to build this AI model that may or may not come to fruition and actually provide predictive maintenance, why don't we just build a tool that when these things inevitably do happen, we can respond much faster?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of one of those ideas that we can leverage right now with the tools that we have today to speed up that time to value.
Yeah. Yeah. So as we wrap things up, Remus, you do a lot of panels, you do a lot of discussions. Thanks so much for hopping on today. But one final question for you. What is a question that you wish you were asked more about, right? You go to a lot of these panels, you have moderators who ask you questions, you're giving presentations and sessions and stuff like that. What's a question you wish an audience member would ask you, a person in leadership at a manufacturing company would ask you, another former panelist? What's a question you wish you would be asked more often that you could talk about?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think the one that I struggle with customers the most is speed to value. So I wish customers were more interested about unlocking value quickly, because my purpose in an integration space is to find a customer that we can become partners with and build solutions that are going to drive value. And if I can do that quickly, then it's much more likely that I will continue to work with this customer for a long time. But we get into these conversations a lot of the time. It's, oh, we have this initiative. We want to do global digital transformation across 50 factories, whatever it might be. But nobody asks about, hey, in this one factory, while we're doing this, this global initiative, how could we get to value really quickly? Like, how can we, even as a sponsorship team from the customer, if I can show value to my leadership, I can likely get that going quicker. This is what we did at Dana, right? We were able to, in that one plant, we're like, hey, in a few months here, we generated over $1 million in value. Use that to drive further transformation initiatives, because once you see the proof is there, proof is in the pudding. If we can deliver some pudding, we'll be able to get a lot more opportunities going quickly. So I wish people would think more about the speed to value.
Right. So you walk into a restaurant, right? And you're looking at the menu and you see all these really cool things that you want to try, you want to eat, but it's going to take a long time for that food to get served to you. So what do you order ahead of time?
Exactly.
You order an appetizer. That way, when you go out there and you order that appetizer,
great analogy,
you start tasting it, you're like, this is really good. Yeah. And it makes you more excited about the meal to come before the main course, and you were still able to sample something a little bit success, right? Bring more appetizers to the manufacturing floor, and you'll be able to taste success a little bit earlier, which will then get leadership more on board.
Yeah,
it'll be one of those things is, hey, maybe you'll order some dessert before the meal comes because you're really excited about what the future has in store. That's I love that. That's a great point. Earlier time to value is something that we should be focusing on to get leadership on board, to get the culture of the people and the employees that work there on board, because if they can see those smaller changes leading up to it, more people are going to buy into wanting the long-term success of the project.
Absolutely. Yep. And to tie into back what we were saying earlier, this quick to deploy maintenance tool could be one of those appetizers.
Yeah.
Right? We don't have to get to AI-based predictive maintenance. We can just drive value with some rapid tools.
Sorry, say that again real quick.
Yeah, we don't have to deliver AI predictive maintenance to get to value, right? I'm still unconvinced. I haven't yet seen a platform that can deliver true predictive maintenance, right? That can say, hey, in a month, that machine's going to go down. We can start with anomaly detection. That one's easy to do. I'm still skeptical of full-on predictive maintenance because, as you know, machines vary widely in the environments that they operate in. So
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. Well, Remus, it is always a pleasure to see you. I hope to see you at some conferences coming up in 2026 as we wrap up the year. But Remus Pop from Concept Reality, go ahead and check them out on their website, on their LinkedIn, what they're doing. They're really helping out some stuff. Of course, I'm Jake Hall, the Manufacturing Millennial. Super excited to be a part of the Wrench Factor, joining to have some of these conversations. And of course, stick around for the next one. Of course, Wrench Factor is happening all the time. So we hope you join us again for the next episode. Until then, have a great week.
have a good one.